Ernest Morrell. I'm a faculty member here, Teachers College in the Arts and Humanities Department. I also direct the Institute for Urban and Minority Education. We call it UMI around here. And it's my privilege to be moderating this tribute. There are several reasons how this all converged. We knew we wanted to do something about testing and Teachers College's legacy in testing going back to the Thorndikes. We also wanted to have a day to talk about some of the things that have been going on with the Gordon Commission and Jeff's work at EPSA. But there's also, taking the opportunity to have a tribute for Professor Gordon and his work. Many of you may not know, but the Institute for Urban and Minority Education, UMI, was started by Professor Gordon 40 years ago. So when we started talking about planning for 125th anniversary events, Trish McNicholas, who's done an amazing job in Suzanne Murphy's office, there were two events that I wanted to grab onto, and it's like, these are going to be parts of our commemoration of Ed Gordon and his legacy. The first one was the lecture series, so the inaugural Edmund Gordon lecture we held 2 months ago, October, and Charles Payne came and spoke. And the second one was this moment here. So what we'll do right now, I'm going to read a tribute to Professor Gordon that I wrote, and it includes some words from colleagues and friends and family as well. They'll be followed by remarks from President and Professor Susan Furman. And then we'll have remarks by our provost, Tom James. And then we'll, depending on time, open it up. There are some remarks I'm sure that many of you around the room would want to make. And Madhabi and I have some letters that have been written on behalf of some of the other honorees that we'll try to read, and then I'll close it up. I forgot the second part, that Professor Gordon's also going to speak and offer a response. Trying to get you out of it is funny. I've been hiding you from interviews all day. I was like, no, he's not going to want to do it. All right, so let me start. What I've divided this into three parts. Part of it is what I call the biographical, and then two, in the words of others, friends and family, and then the third part is in my own words. The biography. Professor Edmund Gordon is the John M. Muser Professor of Psychology, Emeritus at Yale University, Richard March Ho Professor Emeritus of Psychology and Education at Teachers College, Columbia University, and Director Emeritus of the Institute for Urban and Minority Education at Teachers College, Columbia, which he founded in 1973. Dr. Gordon also serves as chairman of the Gordon Commission on the Future of Assessment in Education. Professor Gordon's distinguished career spans professional practice, scholarly life as a minister, clinical and counseling psychologist, research scientist, author, editor, and professor. He has held appointments at several of the nation's leading universities, including Howard, Yeshiva, Columbia, City University of New York, and Yale. Additionally, Dr. Gordon has served as a visiting professor at Harvard University. From July 2000 until August 2001, he was Vice President for Academic Affairs and Interim Dean of Faculty at Teachers College. Dr. Gordon has been recognized as a preeminent member of his discipline. He's an elected fellow of various prestigious associations, including the American Psychological Association, the American Society of Psychological Science, the American Association for Orthopsychiatry, and fellow and life member of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. In 1968, he was elected member of the National Academy of Education. Among his most recent honors is the Edmund W. Gordon Chair for Policy, Evaluation, and Research, created by the Educational Testing Service to recognize his lasting contributions to developments in education, including Head Start, compensatory education, school desegregation, and supplementary education. In 2005, Columbia University named its Harlem, New York campus the Edmund W. Gordon Campus of Teachers College. In 2011, Dr. Gordon received the John Hope Franklin Award for his lifelong commitments to education, equity, and justice. Dr. Gordon has been named one of America's most prolific and thoughtful scholars. He's author of more than 200 articles and 18 books. Edmund W. Gordon has been married to Dr. Susan G. Gordon, MD, since 1948. Yeah. And this is from their CGIS website. Together they have conceived and raised 4 children whom they claim as their most important achievements. In a New York Times article about Gordon's personal life and professional contribution, Gordon cites and this is correct, Elaine Leroy Locke, Herbert G. Birch, and W.E.B. Du Bois as mentors that influenced him throughout his studies. Gordon was struggling to succeed at Howard University when Locke helped to encourage him and keep him on track. Professor Gordon has stated that Locke set him on the course of serious scholarship. Next, he discussed his interaction with Birch, a research psychologist at City College. Birch encouraged Dr. Gordon to go to the library and read. Finally, Dr. Gordon describes his mentorship with W.E.B. Du Bois, a world-renowned author, activist, and co-founder of the NAACP. Du Bois suggested Gordon study the percentage of minority students that succeed despite serious challenges. And many of you know that Dr. Gordon has been instrumental in preserving the legacy of W.B. Du Bois, has several of his papers, helped purchase his childhood home and turn it into a landmark. That's the way you pay back a mentor. So the words of others. These are words from people who are close to him, family members, colleagues, mentees. Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembard fondly recalls her father's influence throughout her life and him never remembering him losing his temper or raising his voice. Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembard describes her relationship with both her parents, Dr. Edmund W. Gordon and Dr. Susan G. Gordon, as very close, citing the profound impact on her professional growth of her first 3 summer jobs with her father as a research assistant at Teachers College, Columbia University. Jessica maintained an interest in education long after graduation, eagerly sharing happy family memories gathered on trips while playing games and during social events with friends. Jessica quickly highlights her father's dedication to his work, which he, unquote, usually brought with him wherever he went, including to a dinner party with a neighbor. Crediting her parents with the significant personal accomplishment of raising 4 accomplished and lovely human beings who do good in this world, Jessica also praises her father's considerable professional achievements, particularly his efforts to change how society understands and approaches the education of low-status people. Proud of her father, the servant leader, activist scholar, and problem solver, Jessica describes Professor Gordon as the most intellectual person she has ever met and one of the most dedicated human beings she knows. A perfectionist, her dad puts huge amount of thought and energy into everything he does and usually excels at it. Professor Wade Boykin of Howard University identifies Professor Gordon as a quintessential scholar activist. Dr. Wade Boykin fondly characterizes Dr. Gordon, his mentor, friend, and collaborator of more than 3 decades, as demonstrating the perfect blend of scholarship and activism. Wade describes his mentor as more than just a glorified academic advisor or a teacher. Since first approaching him in 1975 at a conference, Wade has developed a close friendship with Edmund Gordon, sharing conversations that often perseverate with him for days. In addition to the joy of working together, citing Professor Gordon's significant professional accomplishment as his open-mindedness, desire to grow intellectually, and willingness to alter his perspective with changing times. Professor Boykin credits these traits with keeping Professor Gordon on the cutting edge of issues even after an approximately 60-year career. Kind-hearted and soft-spoken yet strong, Professor Gordon possesses the ability to speak with great power. To Professor Boykin and others, Professor Gordon has proven to be both a role model and a confidant. This is from Dr. Carol Lee, endowed chair professor at Northwestern University. She recalls, "One of my fondest memories of Dr. Gordon is when he visited one of our schools in Chicago, the Betty Shabazz International Charter School. Among his wise comments to the children, he recalled how W.B. Du Bois liked to go to the movies in the afternoon. Dr. Gordon has stood as a giant on so many fronts, from the pioneering work he and his beloved wife, Dr. Susan Gordon, did in terms of healthcare in Harlem, to his seminal work with regard to the education of children and the work with Head Start, to his most current efforts focusing on the role of what he calls supplementary education to equalize educational opportunity to learn among our families living in poverty. Dr. Gordon stands without question as one of the major educational researchers of our time. His work with the ETS and his stewardship of UME in Harlem are further testimony to his breadth of work and his commitment to using research to both advance fundamental knowledge and serve social justice ends. Besides his friendships with the likes of W.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson, Dr. Gordon was also best friends with the magnificent artist Charlie White. He has dedicated a museum to the work of Charlie White, on the property next to his home. I consider him a dear friend, an intellectual mentor, a model husband and father. I love you, Ed. Dr. Eleanor Armour Thomas describes Professor Gordon as gentle, generous, wise, learned, and compassionate. She characterizes Dr. Gordon, her one-time professor who became her lifelong mentor, colleague, and friend, using these carefully selected adjectives, conveying both his sense of humor and comedic abilities. Eleanor recounts Professor Gordon's entertaining imitation of the happy walker, his own mockery of someone attempting to walk uphill to a hotel room after having too much to drink. In addition to fostering a fulfilling personal life by spending time with family and friends, Eleanor cites Professor Gordon's professional contributions to educational research as profound, his most significant accomplishment, according to her, being his interactionist perspective, which he used to account for the relationship between human diversity, learning, and behavior. This lens provided for a new direction for research, teaching, and assessment of diverse populations. And finally, my own words. And I've had a chance to talk about Professor Gordon's professional accomplishments many times, so this is a more personal reflection. I told my wife after reading it this morning, I hope I could get through this in front of people, but I wanted to do this. From my own personal recollections, my sons have described Professor Gordon as the nice man who let us borrow clothes and swim in his pool. Upon meeting my children, Professor Gordon exclaimed, "What beautiful children you have. They are almost as beautiful as my own." This occurred at the beginning of a day-long trip to the Gordon home in Pomona, New York, to discuss the possibility of my taking over as director of UME. Bring the family along, he encouraged, so I did. After a morning of touring his impressive art collection, walking around his beautiful property, and talking about Du Bois, our families, and the contemporary educational landscape, we finally worked our way around to the topic of the directorship of the Institute. "I will be thrilled to have you take over as director," he stated, "but you absolutely cannot take this job unless it is right for you and your family." For those of you who know Professor Gordon, even at 40, it's hard for me to say Ed. This comes as no surprise. He was more concerned with my personal and familial well-being than he was about the institute that he built and nurtured over 4 decades. What else is there to say about this man? He is a towering intellect of a person, but so humble and so concerned with others that he sometimes has to be encouraged to speak. Of the many things I have learned from Professor Gordon over the years, the primary lesson for me has been the value of human capital. Our ultimate legacies will be measured not by the what, so much as the who. The lives that we have the privilege to shape and guide over the course of our own lifetimes. My father, an educator of 47 years and counting, says that teaching makes you eternal because you never know when your gifts will stop giving. If that is the case, and I believe it is, then Professor Gordon's influence is infinite because his words, his ideas, and his values live in and through so many of us. I just want to end this tribute by saying thank you, Ed. I'm so proud to count you as a mentor, a colleague, and a personal friend. On behalf of all of us, Teachers College, and those that have had the privilege of knowing you, thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Teachers College. A very special welcome to the family members of Professor Dick Wolf and Ernie Rothkopf. I think we also hoped that a relative of Professor Robert Thorndike would be here, but couldn't make it. But it's amazing that you could join us today. We're very grateful, and we know you've traveled here. I found this morning astonishing because I've been making myself a student of TC's 125 years this year, so I can talk a little bit knowledgeably about the many accomplishments. And I learned so much this morning. I mean, on a light note, I think that I blamed the rats in the basement mistakenly on E.L. as opposed to Robert Lee. And there are no current rats in the basement. These are historic rats in the basement. But I learned so much about TC's legacy and assessment and how much we owe to our forebears. And I'm so proud that we're carrying on the tradition, and I know that the Provost Tom James is going to speak to that in a few minutes. When we come to celebrating TC's giants, there's certainly none more deserving than Edmund Gordon, and I'm old enough to call him Ed, comfortably. Yeah, I know. I'm saying I'm old enough. And you know, the fact that we're honoring Ed at a testing conference, he actually said to me, please make this the last time you're honoring me, because we've honored Ed in so many different settings and contexts. If we want to talk about supplementary education or comprehensive educational opportunity, which we're working on in the community here, when we inaugurate a lecture series at UMI, whatever we do, we find ourselves honoring Ed Gordon, and that makes so much sense because of the depth and breadth of his influence on Teachers College, and everything we do today we owe so much to Ed. And all his roles here, of course, as an eminent scholar, and it was pointed out this morning, interim vice president for academic affairs, his leadership in departments and in various academic efforts, and of course in the initial leadership of UMI. He's meant so much to TC. And the fact that he, at 92, is continuing to shape the national conversation through the work of the Gordon Commission on how we can best educate and support students and build stronger schools and communities is nothing short of astonishing, and we're so grateful for that. If you look through all these various ways of exerting influence in all these various fields that have engaged Ed, you see a deep concern for equity and an unshakable commitment to help young people thrive and achieve to their full potential. And I think it's that mission, as much as all the specific work that guides us and that remains for us the North Star that we want to follow at Teachers College. It's wonderful to see young scholars following and living in his legacy. Nancy here at the table, and of course Ernest as the new director of UMI, and all the Gordon Fellows that you spoke about this morning, and so many others who we look to in the future for continuing this tremendously important work. As we continue our discussions this afternoon, let's keep in mind Ed's wise counsel. The primary purpose of assessment ought to be to inform and improve teaching and learning. And let's continue his legacy in creating all opportunities for all students to achieve excellence as well as a brighter future. Thank you. Please enjoy the rest of the day.
My role here, briefly, is to recognize and to offer a gift of appreciation to families who are here from the great tradition we're celebrating today. But I want to, rather than offer you a speech, I would like to give you, with the sense of the time, we need to leave time for the conference this afternoon. I'd like to offer you a single image outside of the field of psychology. It's a book I like very much. It's by a New York poet, Delmore Schwartz, and appropriately has the title, In Dreams Begin Responsibility. And that's an appropriate title when we remember these faculty who have worked at Teachers College, who have built fields of knowledge, who have put students out into the world that are also continuing to build those fields, that in dreams begin responsibility. You know, in the imagination of an Ed Gordon, or of Ernst Rothkopf, or Thorndike's plural, or Dick Wolf, in those visions that people had, we find our horizon of great responsibility to continue the task of discovery, invention, helping other human lives, working on the mission of this institution. I'm very conscious of that in my role as Chief Academic Officer, of always coming back to the faculty and welcoming this process, but also prospect of discovery. So with that, we would like to offer some gifts of appreciation to the family who've traveled to be here. And first of all, the family of Ernie Rothkopf. Can you stand up? Trish McNichols is going to help me with this. So thank you so much for coming and being with us. You want to do that? Okay. waist a little bit.
Should have brought a bigger bag. I didn't
Thank
know.
you for coming.
Thank you
and
very
joining
much.
us. Well, and also the family of Dick Wolf, Richard Wolf, here. Oh. Great. That's it. They raise it a little bit.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. This is for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And one, Sir, that's for you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I felt that I certainly ought to begin by publicly asking the institution to stop honoring me. Not that I don't appreciate it, but it does get to be embarrassing. And it's particularly embarrassing today because the thing I'm being honored for is really the thing I know the least about. I'm not a scholar of psychometrics, but I was tapped, I think, for that reason to head the Gordon Commission. And it is very likely my naivete with respect to the field that makes it so lacking in technical detail. A psychometric friend and scholar and member of the commission was correct in saying it is more a vision than a blueprint. I don't know how to tell you to do the things I'm talking about. But I was encouraged this morning as we were reviewing the history. You know, the people who started this field didn't know a lot about it, but they did know enough about some other things to make tremendous contributions to the field of education and to its measurement. And I'm hoping that from the other knowledges I have and the good fortune of having been asked to head the commission, that maybe I can join them. I told Jim Pellegrino that I thanked him for including me with the Thorndikes and Lee Kronbach and Bob Glazer. These are my heroes in measurement. And even when I was not, well, I guess when I first came, Edmund was here. I knew them. I knew Bob well, but I was never close to them because I kind of kept my distance from measurement in those days. But being associated with them and with this institution is an honor to me. Unfortunately, Susan, we haven't done as much on this front as I would hope, and I'm going to talk about that briefly and then quit. But I think we're moving. I came to Teachers College as a student in 1950, before most of you were born. And the interesting thing about my coming was that Teachers College was one of the few places in the country that people my color could come to go to graduate school. Actually, for a period of about 15 years, if you came here in the summertime, it looked like a institution for colored people, because just hundreds of teachers, largely black, came out of the South to Teachers College because Teachers College welcomed us. When I was admitted, Harvard had said no, Princeton had said no, University of Pennsylvania did say yes, and Teachers College admitted me. So I will always be grateful to this institution for what it's done on that front. But not enough people of color here now. And if our friend George Bond were here, he would probably be leading the push for that. Bring more people of color onto the faculty. We've made progress. And it's not just to have the diversity of people represented. We are beginning to recognize that it is in diversity that life is ensured. Who is it? Edmund O. Wilson, the sociobiologist. Beautiful little book on diversity. And he's not talking primarily about racial, ethnic, cultural diversity. He's talking about diversity in living things. And it's being the essence of the continuation of life. Because without it, you know, we will slowly wither away. So I'm deeply grateful to the institution for having honored me in the first place, of admitting me and honoring me so many times. And probably the highest honor you gave me was for a brief period to let me lead the faculty here. So thank you very much. But today's agenda is the future of assessment. And I was just talking with our distinguished president about ways of stepping up that concern here at Teachers College. Assessment has become the driver of education. And if we don't get that right, I suspect we won't get education right. Thank you.
This October, we had the inaugural Edmund W. Gordon Lecture. It's been my goal since coming to UME 3 years ago to endow this lecture. So you are probably sitting on an envelope if you haven't kicked it underneath the table. If not, don't worry about it, there's extras. It's so funny, I'm the son of a preacher. I rarely ever get to kind of pass around a collection. And I was on the other end of it for the first 40 years of my life. But this is a collection for a worthy cause. We're planning to continue this in the near future, but to endow a lecture series and a little bit about it. I mean, it's people talking about populations that are often talked about. That is the populations that are most marginalized in society, but talking with them and about them from a standpoint of hope and opportunity and possibility is the bar that you have to leap over to be able to speak as a Gordon Lecture Fellow. We want to continue that legacy. It is important in honor of someone who has changed the conversation. It's not just talking about a group. It's how you talk in humane and positive ways about what is possible in the group that makes it legendary and transformative. So we would love to have you support that. Other than that, just a general thank you to the families and all of those who have contributed to what has made the first 125 years of Teachers College so special around these issues. From the comments today, we know we have quite a future ahead of us, but it is a legacy that those of us that are still practicing have to embrace with a sense of awe, but also inspiration. And I think that this lunch has been the perfect balance of that awe and inspiration to continue to do good work. So thank you all for being here.